Welcome to another episode of Fantasy Football Free-For-All, Week 2 Injury Report. Unfortunately, as with any NFL season, we have a lot of injuries this week, and a lot of bad ones. Let's start with the players we know are not going to be suiting up this week. We've got Kenny Golladay with Week 2 of his hamstring injury. Unfortunately, he's just not making the progress we hoped, and he's not going to be active for Week 2. A.J. Brown is joining Kenny Golladay on the inactive list this week because of a deep bone bruise. Now this is bleeding in the bone. You want to avoid a fracture. And so that's a big loss for the Titans. And it's a big loss for all fantasy owners because of how much of a deep threat A.J. Brown is. Another wide receiver that is out, Jamison Crowder. Jamison Crowder has a hamstring injury, and it's just going to keep him out. There's just no way he can get a go. But they don't think he's an IR candidate. So keep him on your bench in that IR spot, and hopefully you get some good use out of him in the weeks to come. Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders was a late scratch last week with a hamstring injury. We had known during camp that it wasn't great, but it just absolutely imploded going into Week 1. Fantasy managers were left scrambling. Well, the fantasy gods have come and they have said, you may have Miles Sanders back. Miles Sanders is scheduled to play. If he's on your team, you're going to play him. So there's really not that much analysis that needs to go into it. Now, here's one that is murky. Saints wide receiver Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas went publicly and said that he felt great and that he thinks he'll play. The Saints said that they're going to wait until the game to make a decision. All people in the know in this situation have their mouths very firmly shut, but the thing that's going to happen here is he's going to be a late scratch. There's just no way that Michael Thomas can be explosive and play the way you need him to play with that type of injury. Look elsewhere for Michael Thomas this week. And despite what he says on Twitter, just don't roll it out. Wait till Week 3, Week 4. You'll still get the fantasy value you were promised, and it's going to be a much better showing. You won't have a 0 on your bench, and you need that slot because it's so deep at wide receiver. So don't just take the 0. James Conner. Now, James Conner is another one. We don't really understand what's going on. He practiced in full on Thursday and Friday. It's one of those things. Now all we do is have a backfield that is murkier than before. With Benny Snell and James Conner ready to go, neither one of them is somebody that I'm looking to start. I bet James Conner will play in Week 2, but I think he just tanks everybody's fantasy value rather than having his fantasy value go through the roof. The last one that is a serious concern for me is George Kittle. George Kittle was a second-round pick in almost every format. And he's got, an injury that is just really bothering him. And it's a knee injury that we don't have a ton of information on. And, he came back and played after that knee injury. The problem is he wasn't anywhere near the player that we expect after that injury. And George Kittle is a very tough guy. Shanahan wants him to be on the field because he changes this 49ers offense in a very real way. The issue is he's just not performing at the same caliber with this injury. They should be sitting him out Week 2. He may be ready to go, but that is not somebody you want in your lineup if he's still hampered by this injury. Now, you're saying he's my second round pick. How am I going to plug that hole? There are a lot of mid-tier tight ends that are available. They're not going to get you the production of George Kittle, but Jonnu Smith has an excellent opportunity to be a tight end 1 this week. He's got A.J. Brown out. He's building rapport with Ryan Tannehill, and he's demonstrated that he is a great intermediate target for Tannehill. The Tannehill and the Titans play the Jaguars this week, and that's somebody you want to be pushing on. because the Colts were able to have several points on the Jags last week, even though they lost. This is a week where Jonnu Smith should have a great game, and he should be a perfect bye-week fill-in. Now, there are some other injuries out here that are a little less relevant, but they change the dynamics on some of the teams. Jack Doyle has an ankle and knee injury. He's going to be out for week 2. And this does increase incrementally the targets for Nyheim Hines, Paris Campbell, and T.Y. Hilton. Now, it doesn't make it where I feel like any Colts are a must start, but it's something to note. Another Colts player who's driving target and driving value to those 3 players I just named, Zach Pascal, is questionable for week 2. I think he's probably going to be out there, but they are going to see a diminished expectation for him, which means that there are more targets for Paris Campbell, for T.Y. Hilton, for Nyheim Hines, and maybe even for Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor is still working to get that receiving back figured out, but it's possible that he could see an upgrade this week. Another player that is injured and likely will not contribute is Devante Parker on the Dolphins. This really only helps Preston Williams and Mike Gesicki, but I'm not overly excited with the Dolphins this week, and I think you want to look elsewhere. I have a lot of Preston Williams shares, and the Bills are just a scary defense to me, and even though the Jets got some garbage time production, Fitzpatrick didn't demonstrate that he can really take advantage of that second string defense the way we had hoped. And so I'm looking elsewhere. Now, we've got Henry Ruggs has missed, practices this week. It is likely that I think he'll play, but he's not somebody you want to rely on. Just find somebody else. There are so many options at wide receiver. See if Sammy Watkins is out there. See if Laviska Shenault is out there. See if Paris Campbell is out there. Henry Ruggs he's a rookie wide receiver. He is a speed guy, so every injury is substantial. Every injury slows him down just a fraction of a percent, and that makes the defensive backs able to cover him a little bit better. The other thing is they're against the Saints this week. Marshawn Lattimore is smothering. If he were to be on Ruggs, I think that it is not going to work in your favor. So just look elsewhere. That will conclude the Fantasy Football Free-for-All Week 2 Injury Report. Be on the lookout for a Week 2 recap and waiver wire targets list next week. Have a great weekend and look forward to Sunday.